Teaching English Radio India.
A radio series for teachers of English.
Brought to you by the British Council. Welcome to today's program in our series for teachers of English. I'm Vibash Dash, and I'll be introducing the ideas of many teachers from around our country. And here are just some of the people that we'll be meeting today.
I'm Shobha from Bangalore.
I am Monali from Ahmedabad.
I am Ashok, Navi Mumbai in Thane district.
I'm Nidhi from Bhopal.
I'm Kalpana from Bangalore.
Today, we are looking at a reality that most teachers have to face, handling very large classes, and a technique that can get everyone working actively. Yes, it's pair and group work. Teachers talk about how they use pair and group work, some of the problems they try to overcome, and we listen carefully to the noise levels in a classroom. Stay with us for some ideas that you can adapt for your own teaching situation.
The classroom size is really large, whether it's primary or secondary. The teachers really face this problem, and there are about 150 students in a class.
In my school, there are 168 students. We are having 7 classes, but we have a very poor infrastructure.
In my school, there are 71 students and we only have 2 teachers. And in a single classroom, we sit all 2 classes and teach at a time both classes.
Those teachers are not alone. Their colleagues told us the same thing.
I had this class in the higher secondary section wherein I had to teach them English. There were this huge unruly group of girls. There were about 100 in a group.
These teachers from all over India are describing 2 common problems. Classes can be very big, and sometimes we must teach different classes together. What a massive challenge teachers face. In recent programs, we've heard how teachers are changing from the teacher-centered approach to one that is called learner-centered. In the teacher-centered classroom, the teacher is usually standing at the front of the whole class, providing all the information, and the student's role is often very passive. But if we want our students to be active, to listen and speak, to really use the language, then this is where pair and group work comes in. What is the difference between pair work and group work? Pair work means you ask your students to practice in pairs. For example, they can simply turn to the person who is sitting beside them. It can be set up quickly, with everyone practicing at the same time. Usually, these are very short activities. They allow students to try out something you have just presented or to find the answer to a question. Group work means putting a few students into a group and giving them a task to do together. Exactly how we should group them, we'll talk about next time. The task could be reading and finding answers, discussing a topic, planning a project. It could be a short, medium, or a long activity. So, pair work and group work can be very flexible tools for the teacher to use. Let's now listen to Shobha and Kalpana. They are both experienced teachers. In fact, Kalpana has been working in her school in Bangalore for over 25 years. They believe it's important to find alternatives to whole class teaching, and they say that putting students into pairs or groups can be very effective.
In a whole class situation, only teacher keeps talking. They are only the listeners. We can't judge whether they're actively participating or only the passive listeners. But when they are in groups, each child will have some work to perform. So if they have done with the activity, that means every child has participated in that activity. This group activity will help the teacher also to know whether the learning has actually taken place in that class.
Sometimes in some of the lessons, we require different groups. We do regrouping. We do it in pairs or groups. So according to the activities, we can do the grouping. It's not necessary we change the groups in all the lessons. We have to change sometimes as required.
We asked them to give us some examples of activities using pairs and groups. Here's Shobha again.
Okay, in 7th standard we have a lesson like our festivals. In that, for a whole class activity, one child can be asked to speak about the festivals in 5 to 6 sentences to express himself. So this will be a whole class activity where one child will be speaking and others will be listening. So the others will be very keen to know what the child is speaking about. Okay, this will be a tip for the other children. For small groups activity, the same lesson will match the words like places of worship. Like Hindus, we worship in temples, Christians in churches, like this. So they will have to match. This activity can be given in groups of 4 or 5.
Shobha gives an example of a 7th standard class starting with a whole class activity on the subject of festivals. First, one child is speaking and everyone else is listening. Then she moves on to a small group activity about places of worship. Her students sit and work in small groups, deciding how to match and discuss information about places of worship. Now she gives an example of a pair work activity in the same lesson.
There is if clause, like if I study well, I will pass in the exam. This could be done with pairs. The same groups can be made into pairs, and each pair, like one will give the first part of the sentence, the other one will match. Like if there are good rains, we will have good crops. If you help me, I will solve the problem. One will say the first part of the sentence, the other will say the next part of the sentence. For example, A will say, if you help me. Then B will say, I will solve the problem. So it continues. Like if I have some money, I will buy a new car. So the same lesson will have activities for different interactive patterns like whole class or groups or even pairs, like that.
You are listening to Teaching English Radio India, brought to you by the British Council.
In pairs, students can try out new language that's been presented, new words, a new expression, some grammar. It's quick to set up and everyone gets a chance to speak. In groups, they can be more creative with the English they've been learning. The teacher steps back and allows them this safe space to practice. Teachers like Ashok, Kalpana and Shobha are confident of the benefits of pair and group work.
If we tell the child that you can do it, that means he feels. If teacher can imagine my potential, that I can do this, there is something in myself. So I have to grow up and I have to do it. So it is very important to encourage the student. You can do it, he will definitely do it.
When they are in a group, they learn interaction, which is very important. And to take part, they have their own ideas, so they want to give in. I think it is sort of to develop confidence also. It's very important to make the children work in pairs and groups. They will exchange takes place.
In group activities, like every child will have some work to be performed, so every child feels that I am important. And there is no scope for fear and mistakes also, because teacher is not there sitting next to the children and correcting every time. Then the students feel free to express themselves, and they have that healthy competition in them. Each child is in a hurry that let me finish the work first.
Ashok, Kalpana and then Shobha. Students feel freer and encouraged to do well, and they gain confidence. You can set up pair and group work to encourage healthy competition. Here in India, the education authorities are promoting joyful learning, and that is when all our students are fully engaged and really enjoying their lessons. Now that sounds pretty noisy. But that's when the bell has gone. Wait till you hear these same students working in groups. Here they are doing a pair work activity. It's all under control. Now they are doing a reading activity in small groups. And who is that in the background? Yes, it's the teacher as she makes her way around the room. She is monitoring the class, checking that they are getting on okay, making sure everyone's involved and speaking English to each other, and helping out if they ask for some advice. In our next program, we'll go back to that very same lesson and we'll follow step by step to see how the teacher organizes the class as they do different activities in different groupings. Of course, lively group activities may get noisy, and our classes sometimes appear to be out of control. That is one of the reasons why some teachers are worried about introducing group work. For example, Monali once worked in a school where she had 100 girls in her class, and they were trouble.
I'd given them some group activity and they were so noisy that they disturbed the other classes. Now to bring that in check, I tried to use negative reinforcement by punishing, but that did not work. So I started positive reinforcement through rewards. And because there was this group that had kept its noise levels low, I'd given them a prize for behaving well in my class. So that was one way of handling a huge class.
Teacher and trainer Monali. A prize to keep the noise down? Doesn't that sound a little bit like bribery? Teachers need to be very creative. Another point is that sometimes we just have to negotiate with colleagues in the school. We need to explain that a certain activity is going to create some noise and they just have to accept it as part of being productive. At least that's what Nidhi believes.
There can be a negotiation between teachers. I mean, you can bring down the noise level. At the same time, if you pressurize them too much, they wouldn't be natural. It is really true that when they do group work and they're given the freedom, there's a lot of noise. Agreed. And many a times the entire school is talking about the English class because that's the class which is making the most noise. That's true. At the same time, it's very productive. Because when they are given the freedom, they really work well. And I prefer that if other classrooms are getting disturbed, let them also adopt group strategies. So if there's too much noise all around, it wouldn't really disturb.
That was Nidhi. One thing I have seen is that sometimes teachers take students outside when the weather is okay. As teachers keep saying, English isn't a subject which can be taught in silence. It is a language and it needs to be spoken aloud. Our students need lots of opportunities to communicate. There's more to say next time about organizing pair and group work, especially who you put together and how you organize it. But let's now go through some of the points that teachers have shared with us today. In the same lesson, we may have some time with whole class activities, some time working in pairs, and some in groups. Pair and group work can give all the students a chance to participate and practice, so everyone gets to listen and speak. The teacher's role changes during group work. While the students work in groups, the teacher moves from the front of the class and quietly walks around and monitors. Working together like this, students are in a safe space, they feel freer, less fearful, and gain confidence at using the language. Controlling noise levels is also important. We may have to negotiate with other teachers when we know a lesson is going to be noisy. That's all from this edition of Teaching English Radio India. But we'll be looking at pair and group work again in our next program. I hope you've heard some ideas to adapt for your teaching situation. I'm Vivash Dash, and until next time, goodbye and happy teaching.